Sarah's vulnerability wasn't born of weakness, but of an inherent empathy. She felt deeply, and the world, with its constant barrage of negativity and suffering, weighed heavily on her young shoulders. This empathy, this desire to alleviate pain, was precisely what the cult exploited at IT began subtly. A new community garden sprung up in Meadow Creek, seemingly overnight. Run by a group calling themselves the Seekers of Harmony, they offered workshops on sustainable living and inner peace. Their leader, a charismatic woman named Anya, possessed an almost hypnotic calm. She spoke of a world riddled with discord, a world desperately in need of healing, and Sarah, with her sensitive heart, was immediately drawn in. Anya didn't preach fire and brimstone. Instead, she offered a gentle alternative, a path to enlightenment through meditation, communal living, and selfless service. She spoke of unlocking hidden potential, of transcending the limitations of the ego, and of finding true purpose within a supportive community. Her words resonated with Sarah's yearning for meaning, filling a void that had been growing within her. The Seekers were masters of manipulation. They targeted individuals like Sarah, bright, compassionate souls who felt disillusioned with the world. They offered a sense of belonging, a feeling of being understood, a purpose that seemed both noble and attainable. They showered newcomers with attention, love-bombing them with compliments and affirmations. The workshops were cleverly designed. They began with seemingly harmless exercises, gradually introducing more esoteric concepts. Meditation sessions morphed into guided visualizations designed to bypass the critical mind. Group discussions evolved into carefully orchestrated confessionals, where individuals shared their deepest fears and vulnerabilities, further solidifying their bond with the group. Sarah found herself spending more and more time at the community garden. She loved the feeling of working with her hands, nurturing life from the earth. She enjoyed the camaraderie of the Seekers, their unwavering optimism and their shared commitment to a better world. She felt like she had finally found her place, a community where she truly belonged. But beneath the surface of harmony and enlightenment, a darker current flowed. The Seekers' teachings began to subtly shift, emphasizing the need for absolute obedience, the dangers of outside influences, and the importance of severing ties with those who didn't share their beliefs. The garden, once a symbol of life and growth, became a cage, slowly closing in on Sarah's spirit. Her parents noticed the change. Sarah became increasingly secretive, hesitant to discuss her activities with the Seekers. She dismissed their concerns with vague platitudes about finding herself and pursuing her passions. The bright, vibrant girl they knew was slowly fading away, replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger who echoed the Seekers' rhetoric. The insidious tendrils of the cult were tightening their grip, and Sarah was drifting further and further away. The subtle shift in Sarah's behavior didn't trigger immediate alarm. Teenagers, Mark and Emily reasoned, were prone to mood swings and periods of introspection. They attributed her newfound interest in meditation and communal living to a phase, a temporary exploration of identity. They tried to be supportive, attending a few of the Seekers' events, hoping to understand what drew Sarah to them. The Seekers, of course, put on a flawless performance. They were welcoming and inclusive, showering Mark and Emily with compliments on Sarah's intelligence and compassion. Anya, with her serene smile and gentle voice, assured them that Sarah was simply blossoming under their guidance. She spoke of fostering inner peace and empowering young people to make a positive impact on the world. Mark, ever the pragmatist, remained skeptical that he noticed the subtle inconsistencies in the Seekers' teachings, the way they seemed to deflect direct questions and rely on vague, feel-good platitudes. That he voiced his concerns to Emily, but she dismissed them as unfounded anxieties. She saw the Seekers as a harmless group of idealists, providing Sarah with a sense of community and purpose. However, the changes in Sarah became increasingly pronounced. She stopped spending time with Chloe, claiming that their interests no longer aligned. She abandoned her art, stating that it was a selfish pursuit, incompatible with the Seekers' focus on selfless service. She even started dressing differently, adopting the Seekers' uniform of loose-fitting, earth-toned clothing. Mark and Emily's attempts to intervene were met with resistance. Sarah accused them of being close-minded and judgmental, of not understanding her newfound path. She quoted Anya's teachings, arguing that they were clinging to outdated beliefs and hindering her spiritual growth. The rift between Sarah and her parents widened, creating a chasm of misunderstanding and resentment. One evening, Mark stumbled upon Sarah's journal. He knew it was a violation of her privacy, but his desperation outweighed his scruples. What he found chilled him to the bone. The journal was filled with cryptic entries about surrendering to the collective consciousness, purging negative energies, and preparing for a great transformation. At it was clear that Sarah had been completely indoctrinated. He confronted Emily with his discovery, and the reality of the situation finally hit her. The Seekers weren't a harmless group of idealists. They were a manipulative cult, systematically brainwashing their daughter. The gentle guidance Anya had promised was a carefully crafted facade, masking a sinister agenda. Their daughter was being stolen from them, piece by piece, and they were powerless to stop it. Desperate, they sought help from the local authorities, but their concerns were dismissed. The police chief, a respected member of the community, was a regular attendee at the Seekers events. He assured Mark and Emily that the Seekers were a law-abiding organization, and that Sarah was simply exercising her right to freedom of religion. With nowhere else to turn, Mark remembered an old friend, a man who had served alongside him in the military, a man who possessed a unique set of skills, a man who wasn't afraid to bend the rules, a man named Jason Statham. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. He picked up the phone, his hand trembling, and dialed the number. The fate of their daughter hung in the balance. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. Statham. Mark swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. Jason? It's Mark Peterson. We served together in Kandahar. A pause. Peterson. Yeah, I remember. It's been a while. What can I do for you? Mark hesitated, unsure how to explain the bizarre situation. It's about my daughter, Sarah. She's gotten involved with a group, a cult. I think they've brainwashed her. Jason. I don't know what else to call it. Statham's voice hardened. A cult? What kind of cult? Mark explained everything, from the seemingly innocuous community garden to Sarah's complete transformation. He described Anya's manipulative charm, the Seeker's insidious teachings, and the police chief's dismissive response. He poured out his fear, his desperation, his helplessness. Statham listened in silence, his breathing the only sound on the line. When Mark finished, he spoke, his voice low and resolute. Give me the details. Address, names, everything you've got. Mark rattled off the information, his voice shaking with relief. Thank you, Jason. Thank you. I don't know what we would do without you. Don't thank me yet, Statham said. Cults are dangerous. They're good at what they do. This won't be easy. I understand, Mark said. Just bring her home, Jason. Please. I will, Statham promised. I'll be in Meadow Creek tomorrow. Stay put, and don't do anything rash. I'll contact you when I arrive. The line went dead. Mark hung up the phone, a flicker of hope igniting in his weary heart. Jason Statham was coming. Meanwhile, miles away, in a secluded cabin nestled in the woods, Jason Statham was already preparing. He pulled out a well-worn duffel bag and began to pack a Glock 19, a combat knife, a tactical vest, and a selection of breaching tools. He worked with a quiet efficiency. His movements precise and deliberate. He knew what he was getting into. He had dealt with cults before, seen the damage they could inflict, the lives they could destroy. He understood their tactics, their methods of manipulation, their unwavering devotion to their twisted ideology. He also knew that the only way to break their hold was to confront them head-on, to dismantle their power structure, and to expose their lies. It was a dangerous game, but he was willing to play it. He had seen too much suffering in his life to stand idly by while another innocent soul was consumed by darkness. He glanced at a faded photograph on his desk. A picture of him and Mark, young and full of hope, serving together in Afghanistan. He owed Mark a debt of loyalty and friendship. He wouldn't let him down. He wouldn't let Sarah down. He would bring her home, no matter the cost. He zipped up the duffel bag, his eyes hardening with resolve. That it was time to go to work. The following morning, Statham arrived in Meadow Creek. He wasn't flashy. No roaring muscle car or conspicuous entrance. He drove a nondescript sedan, blending seamlessly into the suburban landscape. He parked a block away from the Petersons' house and surveyed the scene. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, and an unsettling sense of normalcy. It was the perfect hunting ground for a cult. He called Mark, his voice clipped and professional. "I'm here. Stay inside that I'll be in touch." Statham spent the next few hours observing the Seekers community garden. At It was a hive of activity, with people tending to the plants, meditating in the sun, and engaging in earnest conversations. Anya, the cult leader, moved among them like a benevolent queen, her presence radiating an aura of calm and authority. He watched Sarah, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes devoid of their former sparkle. She moved with a robotic precision, her movements mirroring those of the other Seekers. She seemed detached, disconnected from the world around her. It was clear that the cult had taken complete control. Statham approached the garden, his senses on high alert. He scanned the faces of the Seekers, searching for any sign of hostility. He noticed a few individuals who seemed particularly watchful, their eyes following his every move. They were the enforcers, the ones responsible for maintaining order and enforcing the cult's rules. He engaged Anya in conversation, feigning curiosity about the Seeker's mission. She welcomed him with open arms, her smile warm and inviting. She spoke of creating a harmonious community, of transcending the ego, and of finding inner peace through selfless service. Statham listened patiently, his mind dissecting her every word, searching for the underlying deception. He recognized the classic cult tactics, the love bombing, the thought-stopping cliches, the subtle pressure to conform. He knew that Anya was a skilled manipulator, a master of psychological warfare. He asked about Sarah, expressing concern about her well-being. Anya assured him that Sarah was thriving, that she had finally found her true purpose in life. She dismissed Mark and Emily's concerns as the anxieties of overprotective parents who couldn't understand their daughter's spiritual journey. Statham didn't reveal his true intentions. He simply thanked Anya for her time and promised to consider joining the Seekers. He left the garden, his mind racing, his plan taking shape. He knew that he couldn't reason with Anya, that he couldn't appeal to her sense of humanity. The only way to save Sarah was to use force, to dismantle the cult from the inside out. He returned to his car and contacted Mark. "I've seen Sarah," he said. "She's deep in it. This is going to be more complicated than I thought." "What do you mean?" Mark asked, his voice laced with anxiety. "They've got her completely brainwashed," Statham said. "Breaking their hold won't be easy. But I have a plan. It's risky, but it's our only chance." He laid out his plan, explaining the steps he would take to infiltrate the cult, gather information, and rescue Sarah. Mark listened in silence, his hope mingled with fear. He knew that Statham was their last chance, but he also knew that the odds were stacked against them. The battle for Sarah's soul was about to begin. Statham's plan was simple, but audacious. He would present himself as a disillusioned seeker, someone searching for meaning and purpose in a world gone mad. He would attend the Seekers' workshops, participate in their activities, and slowly gain their trust. Once he was inside, he would gather information about their operations, identify their weaknesses, and locate Sarah. Then, he would strike. That evening, Statham attended the Seekers' evening meditation session. He sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes closed, his mind focused. He didn't chant or hum. He didn't try to empty his mind. He simply observed, listening to the Seekers' rhythmic breathing, their murmured affirmations, their unwavering devotion to Anya. After the session, Anya approached him, her eyes filled with genuine warmth. "Welcome, brother," she said. "I sense a great deal of pain in you. We can help you heal." Statham lowered his head, feigning vulnerability. "I've been searching for something my whole life," he said. "I don't know what it is, but I know I haven't found it yet." Anya placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You've come to the right place," she said. "We can show you the way." Over the next few days, Statham immersed himself in the Seekers' world. He attended their workshops, participated in their communal meals, and listened to their endless lectures on enlightenment and harmony. He played the part of a lost soul, eager to embrace their teachings and find solace in their community. He learned about the Seekers' rigid hierarchy, their strict code of conduct, and their unwavering loyalty to Anya. He discovered that they were not simply a harmless group of idealists. They were a tightly controlled organization, with a dark secret hidden beneath their veneer of serenity. He also learned about Sarah's role within the cult. She had become one of Anya's most trusted disciples, a model of obedience and devotion. She was being groomed to become a leader within the organization, a powerful tool for spreading Anya's message. Statham knew that he had to act quickly. The longer Sarah remained under Anya's influence, the harder it would be to break her free. He needed to find a way to reach her, to remind her of who she was before she was completely lost. One evening, he found Sarah alone, tending to the garden. He approached her cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. "Sarah?" he said, his voice soft and gentle. She turned to face him, her eyes blank and unseeing. "I am not Sarah," she said. "I am a seeker of harmony." Statham's heart sank. The brainwashing was complete. But he refused to give up. "I know you're in there, Sarah," he said. "I know you remember your family, your friends, your life before this." Sarah's expression flickered for a moment, a brief glimpse of the girl he had seen in the photographs. But then, the blankness returned. "You are mistaken," she said. "I have never been happier." Statham knew that he couldn't reach her with words. He needed to show her. To prove to her that the Seeker's world was a lie, he needed to find a way to break through the walls of her mind, to awaken the girl who was trapped inside. And he knew just how to do it. Statham's plan involved triggering a memory, a potent reminder of Sarah's past life. He knew from Mark that Sarah had been passionate about painting, particularly landscapes. He needed to create a scenario that would reawaken that passion, to jolt her out of her hypnotic state. The next morning, during a communal work session, Statham accidentally spilled a can of vibrant blue paint near Sarah. The paint splattered onto the ground, creating a small puddle of brilliant color. Sarah knelt to clean it up. Statham subtly dropped a small paintbrush beside her. He watched her carefully. For a moment, she simply stared at the paint, her expression blank. But then, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. Her fingers twitched. As if itching to pick up the brush, Statham stepped back. Giving her space, he watched as she hesitantly reached for the brush, her hand trembling. She dipped it into the blue paint and began to idly swirl it around on the ground. Slowly, tentatively, she began to paint. She started with simple strokes, abstract shapes, but as she continued, her movements became more confident, more deliberate. She painted a sky, a field, a distant mountain range. She painted a landscape, a scene from her past, a memory, struggling to surface. Anya noticed what was happening and approached them, her expression hardening. "What are you doing, Sarah?" she asked, her voice sharp. Sarah didn't respond. She was completely engrossed in her painting, lost in her own world. Anya tried to pull the brush from her hand, but Statham intervened, grabbing Anya's arm. "Let her paint," he said, his voice low and menacing. Anya glared at him, her eyes filled with anger. "You are interfering," she said. "You are disrupting the harmony." "I'm helping her remember who she is," Statham said. Anya tried to summon the other seekers, but Statham moved quickly. Cutting her off, he knew that he couldn't afford to let the situation escalate. He needed to get Sarah out of there, to a place where she could be free from Anya's influence. He grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her to her feet. "Come with me," he said. Sarah hesitated for a moment, her eyes darting between Statham and Anya. But then, she made her decision. She followed Statham, leaving Anya standing alone in the garden, her face contorted with rage. Statham led Sarah to his car and drove away, leaving the Seekers' community garden behind. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew that he had to get Sarah to a safe place, a place where she could begin to heal. He glanced at Sarah, her face still smeared with blue paint. He saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes, a spark of the girl she used to be. He knew that the battle was far from over, but he had taken the first step. He had broken through the cult's brainwashing, and he had given Sarah a chance to reclaim her life. The real fight was just beginning. Statham drove to a secluded motel on the outskirts of Meadow Creek. It wasn't much, but it was safe. For now, he needed to give Sarah time to deprogram, to process what had happened, to reconnect with her past. He sat her down on the edge of the bed and handed her a bottle of water. "Take it easy," he said. "You've been through a lot." Sarah stared at the water, her eyes wide and unfocused. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We're safe," Statham said. "Away from Anya and the Seekers." Sarah flinched at the mention of Anya's name. "I don't understand," she said. "What's happening to me?" "You're waking up," Statham said. "You're remembering who you are." He spent the next few hours talking to her, gently guiding her through her memories, reminding her of her family, her friends, her passions. He showed her photographs of her paintings, her art projects, her life before the Seekers. Slowly, gradually, Sarah began to emerge. The blankness in her eyes faded, replaced by a flicker of recognition, a glimmer of understanding. She began to ask questions, to express doubts, to challenge the Seekers' teachings. But the cult's influence was still strong. Sarah was torn between her past life and her newfound beliefs. She was confused, frightened, and desperately in need of guidance. Statham knew that he couldn't leave her alone. He needed to protect her, to support her, to help her navigate the treacherous path to recovery. As darkness fell, Statham knew that the Seekers would be coming. They wouldn't let Sarah go without a fight. They would stop at nothing to reclaim their lost disciple. He barricaded the door, reinforced the windows, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. He knew that he was outnumbered, but he was ready. He had faced worse odds before, and he had always come out on top. He didn't have to wait long. A convoy of black SUVs pulled up outside the motel, their headlights illuminating the room. A group of burly men, their faces grim and determined, emerged from the vehicles and surrounded the building. Statham grabbed his Glock and took up a position by the window. He watched as the men approached the door, their eyes fixed on the room. He knew that they were coming for Sarah, and he wasn't going to let them get her. The door burst open, and the men stormed into the room, their weapons drawn. Statham opened fire, his shots precise and deadly. The room erupted in chaos, the air filled with gunfire and screams. Statham moved with lightning speed, dodging bullets, delivering brutal blows, taking down the men one by one. He was a whirlwind of violence, a force of nature, a one-man army. He fought with a ferocity born of desperation, driven by his determination to protect Sarah, to save her from the clutches of the cult. He knew that he was outnumbered, but he didn't care. He would fight to the death. If necessary, he would not let the Seekers take Sarah back. The battle raged on, the motel room transforming into a war zone. But Statham refused to yield. He fought with skill, with courage, with unwavering resolve, and in the end, he prevailed. The remaining Seekers, battered and bruised, retreated, leaving their fallen comrades behind. Statham stood panting in the center of the room, his body aching, his clothes soaked in blood. He had won the first battle, but he knew that the war was far from over. Anya and the Seekers would be back, and next time, they would be even more determined. Statham knew they couldn't stay at the motel. It was compromised. He needed a safe house, a place where he could regroup and plan his next move. He called Mark, his voice grim. "They know where we are. They attacked the motel. We need to move." Mark was frantic. "Is Sarah all right? Are you hurt?" "We're both fine," Statham said. "But they're not going to stop. They'll come after you. After Emily. You need to get out of the house, go somewhere safe." Mark hesitated. "Where can we go? The police won't help us." "I know a place," Statham said. "An old hunting cabin in the woods, a few miles outside of town. It's secluded, off the grid. They won't find you there." He gave Mark the directions and told him to leave immediately. He also told him to arm himself, to be prepared to defend himself if necessary. He knew that Mark wasn't a fighter, but he had to be ready. The stakes were too high. Statham packed his gear and led Sarah out of the motel, keeping a watchful eye for any signs of pursuit. He drove to the hunting cabin, his mind racing, his senses on high alert. When they arrived, Mark and Emily were already there, their faces pale and drawn. They rushed to embrace Sarah, their relief evident. But Statham knew that their safety was only temporary. The Seekers would find them eventually. He had to be prepared. He spent the next few hours setting up a perimeter around the cabin, laying traps, and establishing lines of defense. He knew that the Seekers would come in force, and he had to be ready to meet them as darkness fell. Statham received a call on his satellite phone. It was Anya. "You cannot hide from us. Jason Statham, she said, her voice cold and menacing. Sarah belongs with us. You cannot keep her from her destiny. She doesn't belong to you, Statham said. She's a human being, not a possession. You are mistaken, Anya said. She is one of us. She has chosen her path. You brainwashed her, Statham said. You manipulated her. You stole her life. We gave her life, Anya said. We gave her purpose. We gave her meaning. You gave her lies, Statham said, and I'm going to expose them. Anya laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Statham's spine. You cannot stop us, Jason Statham, she said. We are stronger than you think. And we are coming for Sarah. And for you. The line went dead. Statham knew that Anya wasn't bluffing. The Seekers were coming, and they were coming to kill. That he turned to Sarah, her face pale and frightened. It's going to be all right, he said, his voice reassuring. I won't let them hurt you. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw a flicker of doubt, a glimmer of fear. That he knew that Sarah was still torn, still uncertain, and he knew that the Seekers would exploit that weakness. He had to protect her, not just from their physical attacks, but from their psychological manipulation. He had to show her the truth, to convince her that she was making the right choice. The night was going to be long, and the battle was far from over. The night was quiet, too quiet. Statham knew the Seekers were out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But he couldn't just sit and wait. He needed information. He needed to know what he was up against, what Anya was planning. He decided to infiltrate the Seekers' compound. He waited until the early hours of the morning. When the moon was hidden behind the clouds, he dressed in dark clothing. His face obscured by shadow, he moved silently through the woods, a ghost in the night. He reached the perimeter of the Seekers' property. It was more heavily guarded than he had anticipated. Security cameras scanned the area, motion sensors triggered alarms, and armed guards patrolled the grounds. Statham disabled the cameras one by one, using his knowledge of electronics and his years of experience in covert operations. He bypassed the motion sensors, using his agility and stealth to avoid detection. He neutralized the guards, using a combination of hand-to-hand combat and silent weapons. He moved through the compound like a shadow, gathering information, mapping the layout of the buildings, identifying key personnel. He discovered that the Seekers were not just a small group of idealists. They were a well-organized, well-funded organization with connections to powerful people. He found a map of the compound, revealing a network of underground tunnels and hidden rooms. He discovered that Anya was planning a mass indoctrination ceremony, a ritual designed to completely erase the identities of her followers and transform them into mindless drones. He located Sarah's room. It was small and sparsely furnished, with a single bed, a small table, and a barred window. He saw her sitting on the bed, her face pale and drawn, her eyes staring blankly ahead. He wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that he was there, that he was going to rescue her. But he knew that he couldn't. He had to remain undetected, to gather as much information as possible before making his move. He continued his reconnaissance, exploring the compound, searching for any sign of weakness. He found a hidden room, a laboratory where the Seekers were experimenting with mind-altering drugs and hypnotic techniques. He discovered that they were using these methods to control their followers, to suppress their emotions, and to erase their memories. He realized that Anya was not just a charismatic leader. She was a ruthless scientist, a mad woman who was willing to do anything to achieve her twisted goals. He had seen enough. He had gathered the information. He needed. It was time to leave. He made his way back to the perimeter, using the same stealth and skill that he had used to enter the compound. He disabled the cameras, bypassed the motion sensors, and neutralized the guards. He returned to the hunting cabin, his mind racing, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a plan, a desperate plan to rescue Sarah and expose Anya's lies. But he knew that it was going to be a suicide mission. The Seekers were too powerful, too well organized, too well connected. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. But he didn't care. He had made a promise to Mark, a promise to bring Sarah home, and he wasn't going to break that promise, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. The hall was a maelstrom of chaos. The Seekers, caught off guard, were easy targets, but there were too many. Statham knew he couldn't kill them all. He needed to reach Sarah, To get her off that table before Anya could administer the drug, that he fought his way through the crowd, dodging blows, firing his weapons, creating a path towards Sarah. The Seekers, their minds clouded by indoctrination, fought with a mindless fervor, throwing themselves at him, willing to die for Anya. Statham reached the table and began to untie Sarah, his hands trembling with adrenaline. He could feel Anya's eyes on him, burning with hatred. As he freed Sarah, Anya lunged at him, a syringe filled with the mind-altering drug in her hand. Statham dodged the attack and disarmed her, sending the syringe flying across the room. He grabbed Anya by the throat and slammed her against the table, his face inches from hers. "This ends now," he said, his voice a low growl. He was about to deliver the final blow when he saw Sarah's eyes widen in terror. "Don't kill her, Jason," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Please." Statham hesitated, his hand trembling. He couldn't kill Anya in front of Sarah. He had to find another way. He released Anya and turned to face the Seekers, his weapons still firing. He knew that he was outnumbered, but he didn't care. He was going to fight to the death. If necessary, he was going to save Sarah. No matter the cost. He grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her to her feet. "We have to get out of here," he said. He led her towards the exit, fighting off the Seekers, clearing a path through the chaos. As they reached the door, Anya screamed, "Stop them! Don't let them escape!" The Seekers surged forward, blocking their path. Statham knew that they were trapped. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and outgunned. But then, a miracle happened. A group of armed men burst into the hall, firing their weapons at the Seekers. The men were led by Mark Peterson, his face grim and determined. "We're here to help," Mark shouted. "Let's get Sarah out of here." Statham was stunned that he had told Mark and Emily to stay at the cabin. He had warned them about the danger. But they had ignored his instructions. They had come to rescue their daughter. He didn't have time to argue. He simply nodded and joined Mark in the fight. Together, they cleared a path through the Seekers, creating an opening for Sarah to escape. They fought their way out of the hall, through the compound, towards the perimeter. The Seekers pursued them, their numbers dwindling, their resolve weakening. As they reached the edge of the property, they were met by Emily Peterson, who was waiting for them in a getaway car. They piled into the car and sped away, leaving the Seekers' compound behind. They had done it. They had rescued Sarah. They had exposed Anya's lies. They had won the battle. But they knew that the war was far from over. Anya was still out there, and she would not rest until she had her revenge. They sped away from the Seekers' compound, Emily driving with a reckless abandon. Born of fear and adrenaline, Mark, shotgun in hand, scanned the road behind them, expecting pursuit. Statham, his body aching, his mind racing, held Sarah close, reassuring her that everything was going to be all right. They returned to the hunting cabin, their sanctuary now a symbol of their defiance. They knew that Anya would not let them go, that she would stop at nothing to reclaim Sarah and silence them forever. They needed to prepare for the final battle. Statham contacted his network of contacts, calling in favors, gathering resources. That he needed weapons, ammunition, and a safe place to hide. He also needed to expose Anya's lies, to reveal the truth about the Seekers to the world. He leaked information to the media, providing evidence of the cult's manipulative practices, their mind-altering experiments, their connections to powerful people. He hoped that the exposure would weaken Anya's influence, that it would turn her followers against her. But he knew that it wouldn't be enough. Anya was too powerful, too well-connected. She would use her resources to discredit him, to silence the media, to cover up her crimes. He needed to take her down. Once and for all, he decided to launch a full-scale assault on the Seekers' compound, to dismantle their organization, to rescue their remaining followers, and to bring Anya to justice. He knew that it was a suicide mission, but he was willing to sacrifice everything to save Sarah and protect the innocent. That he gathered Mark and his men, explaining his plan, outlining their objectives. That he knew that they were outmatched, outgunned, and outnumbered, but he also knew that they were fighting for something worth fighting for. They spent the night preparing for the assault, cleaning their weapons, loading their ammunition, and saying their goodbyes. They knew that they might not survive the battle, but they were ready to face their fate. As dawn broke, they set out for the Seekers' compound, Their faces grim and determined, they drove in a convoy of armored vehicles, their weapons at the ready. They reached the perimeter of the compound and launched their assault. Statham led the charge, his body a whirlwind of violence, his weapons firing with deadly accuracy. They breached the security fences, disabled the cameras, and neutralized the guards. They stormed the buildings, clearing room after room, rescuing the Seekers' followers and eliminating their enforcers. The battle raged on, the compound transforming into a war zone. The Seekers fought with a fanaticism born of indoctrination, but they were no match for Statham's skill, his courage, and his unwavering resolve. He moved through the compound like a force of nature, his movements precise and deadly, his every action calculated to achieve maximum impact. He used his knowledge of the terrain, his expertise in combat tactics, and his years of experience in covert operations to outwit and outmaneuver his enemies. He fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Driven by his determination to save Sarah and protect the innocent, he knew that he was fighting for something worth fighting for. And he was willing to die to achieve his goal as Statham and his allies fought their way through the compound. They encountered fierce resistance from the Seekers, who were willing to die for Anya and their twisted ideology. But Statham and his men were relentless, pushing forward, clearing room after room, rescuing the cult's followers and eliminating their enforcers. They reached the main building, where Anya was holed up, surrounded by her most loyal disciples. Statham knew that the final confrontation was at hand. He stormed the building, his weapons blazing, his body a whirlwind of violence. The Seekers tried to stop him, but he was too fast, too strong, too determined. He reached Anya's office, the door barricaded, the windows reinforced. He knew that she was inside, waiting for him. He kicked down the door and charged into the room, his weapons firing. The Seekers tried to protect Anya, but Statham was relentless, taking them down one by one. He finally reached Anya, who was standing behind a desk, her eyes burning with hatred. "You cannot stop me, Jason Statham," she said, her voice cold and menacing. "I am doing God's work." "You're a monster," Statham said. "You're manipulating innocent people, brainwashing them, and turning them into slaves." "I am giving them purpose," Anya said. "I am giving them meaning. I am leading them to enlightenment." "You're leading them to destruction," Statham said. He lunged at Anya, grabbing her by the throat. She fought back, her nails scratching at his face, her teeth trying to bite his hand. Statham slammed her against the wall, his grip tightening. He was about to kill her when she started to laugh. "You cannot kill me, Jason Statham," she said, her voice mocking. "I am more than you can imagine. I am a force of nature. I am immortal." She closed her eyes and began to chant, her voice growing louder and louder. The room started to shake, the windows rattled, and the lights flickered. Statham felt a surge of energy coursing through his body, a strange, unsettling sensation. He realized that Anya was using her powers, her mind-altering abilities, to try to control him. He fought back, using his willpower, his determination, his years of training to resist her influence. He focused on Sarah, on her innocent face, on her desperate plea for help. He remembered his promise to Mark, his vow to protect Sarah, to bring her home. He couldn't let Anya win. He couldn't let her destroy their lives. He tightened his grip on Anya's throat, his eyes burning with resolve. "You're not immortal," he said. "You're just a fraud. And you're going down." He squeezed, his grip unrelenting. Anya's eyes widened in terror, her face turning blue. She struggled to breathe, her body convulsing, and then she went limp. Statham released her, letting her fall to the ground. He watched as her body twitched, her eyes glazed over, her life fading away. He had done it. He had defeated Anya. He had destroyed the Seekers. He had saved Sarah. But as he looked around the room, at the bodies of the fallen, at the faces of the rescued, he realized that the battle was far from over. The war against evil would never end. There would always be monsters like Anya, preying on the weak and the vulnerable. But there would also be heroes like Statham, willing to fight for what is right, to protect the innocent, and to bring justice to the world. Statham stood amidst the carnage, the air thick with the smell of smoke and blood. The surviving Seekers, their minds freed from Anya's influence, were huddled together, confused and disoriented. He approached Sarah, who was standing near the window, her face pale and drawn. He reached out to her, his hand trembling. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft and gentle. "Are you all right?" Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. I don't know," she said. "What happened? Where am I?" "You're safe now," Statham said. "You're away from Anya and the Seekers." He took her hand and led her out of the office, through the compound, towards the waiting vehicles. The surviving Seekers followed them, their faces filled with gratitude. As they reached the perimeter, they were met by Mark and Emily, who rushed to embrace Sarah, their relief evident. "We're so glad you're safe," Emily said, her voice choked with emotion. "We thought we'd lost you," Mark said, his eyes filled with tears. Sarah hugged her parents tightly, her body shaking with sobs. She was finally home, back with the people who loved her, free from the clutches of the cult. But Statham knew that their ordeal was far from over. Anya's influence was still strong, her followers still loyal. They would not give up easily. He needed to protect Sarah, to ensure that she was safe from any further harm. He decided to take her and her parents to a safe house, secluded location where they could recover and rebuild their lives. He gathered his allies and led them out of the compound, leaving the surviving Seekers behind. He knew that they would be taken care of, that they would be given the help they needed to heal and reintegrate into society. They drove to the safe house, a remote cabin in the mountains, far away from Meadow Creek and the Seekers' influence. They arrived late at night, exhausted but relieved. They spent the next few days recovering from their ordeal, resting, eating, and talking. Sarah slowly began to regain her memories, to reconnect with her past, to reclaim her identity. She remembered her love of painting, her passion for art, her dreams of becoming an artist. She remembered her friends, her family, her life before the Seekers. She started to paint again, her canvases filled with vibrant colors and fantastical images. She found solace in her art, a way to express her emotions, to process her trauma, and to heal her wounds. Statham watched her, his heart filled with hope that he knew that Sarah was going to be all right, that she was going to overcome her ordeal and live a full and happy life. He had done his job, that he had rescued Sarah, he had brought her home. But he also knew that his work was far from over. There were still many innocent people out there, vulnerable to the influence of cults and manipulators. He needed to continue fighting, to protect the weak, to expose the lies, and to bring justice to the world. He was a warrior, a protector, a guardian, and he would never stop fighting for what is right. While Sarah began her long road to recovery, the authorities finally descended upon the Seekers' compound. The local police, initially dismissive and perhaps even complicit, were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the operation and the evidence of criminal activity. Federal agents arrived, securing the scene and launching a full-scale investigation. The media frenzy was intense. The story of the Seekers of Harmony, their charismatic leader Anya, and their manipulative practices dominated the headlines for weeks. The public was outraged, demanding answers and calling for justice. The surviving Seekers, freed from Anya's influence, cooperated with the authorities, providing valuable information about the cult's operations, their funding sources, and their connections to powerful people. The investigation led to arrests, indictments, and the dismantling of the Seekers' network. The community of Meadow Creek was shaken to its core. The idyllic facade of suburban life had been shattered, revealing a dark underbelly of manipulation, control, and abuse. People struggled to come to terms with what had happened, to understand how such a sinister organization could have taken root in their midst. Mark and Emily Peterson became local heroes, their story a testament to the power of love, courage, and resilience. They spoke out against the dangers of cults and manipulation, sharing their experiences and offering support to other families who had been affected by similar tragedies. Statham, however, remained in the shadows. He had done what he had set out to do, rescuing Sarah and bringing Anya to justice. He had no desire for recognition or praise. He simply wanted to move on, to find his next mission, to continue his fight against evil. He visited Sarah one last time, at the safe house in the mountains. She was painting in the garden, her face radiant, her eyes filled with joy. "Thank you, Jason," she said, her voice sincere. You saved my life. You saved yourself, Statham said. You had the strength to break free. I just gave you a little push. He smiled at her, his heart filled with pride that he knew that she was going to be all right. She was going to heal, to recover, and to live a full and happy life. He said goodbye to Mark and Emily, thanking them for their courage and their trust. He knew that they would take good care of Sarah, that they would provide her with the love and support she needed to thrive. He left the safe house and drove away, disappearing into the mountains. He had a mission to fulfill, a destiny to pursue. He was a warrior, a protector, a guardian, and he would never stop fighting for what is right. As he drove, he received a call on his satellite phone. It was a new client, a desperate parent, a troubled child. Another cult, another manipulator, another innocent soul in need of rescue. Statham sighed, his face grim. The war against evil never ends. But he was ready. He was always ready. He answered the phone, his voice low and resolute. Statham, he said. What can I do for you? Sarah's recovery was a long and arduous process, a journey of healing that tested her strength, her resilience, and her spirit. The trauma she had endured at the hands of the Seekers had left deep scars, both physical and emotional. She struggled with nightmares, flashbacks, and anxiety attacks. She found it difficult to trust others, to open herself up to new experiences, to believe in the goodness of humanity. But she was not alone. Her parents, Mark and Emily, were by her side every step of the way, offering her unconditional love, unwavering support, and endless patience. They created a safe and nurturing environment, a place where she could express her emotions, process her trauma, and heal her wounds. They sought professional help, consulting with therapists, psychologists, and experts in cult recovery. They learned about the techniques of manipulation and control, about the psychological effects of brainwashing, and about the strategies for overcoming trauma. They attended support groups, connecting with other families who had been affected by cults and manipulation. They found solace in sharing their experiences, in learning from others, and in realizing that they were not alone. Sarah found comfort in her art. She painted her fears, her anxieties, and her hopes onto her canvases, transforming her trauma into something beautiful, something meaningful, something powerful. She reconnected with her friends, rekindling old relationships and forging new bonds. She discovered the importance of connection, of community, of belonging. She learned to trust again, to believe in herself, and to embrace the future with optimism and hope. Statham remained a distant but supportive presence in her life. He checked in on her periodically, offering words of encouragement, sharing his wisdom, and reminding her of her strength. He taught her self-defense techniques, empowering her to protect herself from harm. He instilled in her a sense of confidence, a belief in her ability to overcome any obstacle. That he showed her that she was not a victim, but a survivor, that she was not defined by her trauma, but by her courage, her resilience, and her spirit. Sarah's recovery was a testament to the power of love, connection, and support. It was a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal, that even the darkest traumas can be overcome, and that even the most broken spirits can be restored. She emerged from her ordeal stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than ever before. She dedicated her life to helping others, too. He listened intently, his face grim, his eyes hardening with resolve. He knew what he had to do. The details of the new case blurred into a familiar pattern. A vulnerable youth, a charismatic predator, a web of lies and manipulation. It was the same story, different faces, a different location, but the underlying darkness remained constant. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with danger and uncertainty. He knew that he would face resistance, betrayal, and perhaps even death. But he also knew that he could not turn away, that he could not abandon those who needed his help. He was a protector, a guardian, a shield against the darkness. He was a force for good in a world that often seemed to be consumed by evil. He finished his call. The weight of the new mission settling upon his shoulders, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. He looked out at the horizon, the sun beginning to rise, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold. A new day was dawning, A day filled with hope and promise. He knew that the battle against evil would never be won. But he also knew that it was a battle worth fighting. He would continue to fight, to protect the vulnerable, to expose the lies, and to bring justice to the world. One rescue at a time. He picked up his bag, his weapons, and his resolve. He was ready. He stepped out into the dawn. A lone figure silhouetted against the rising sun. He was Jason Statham. And he was coming. He always comes. And he always brings them home. The end.